So today we're going to be making a dish called Chicken Chasseur, and the term chasseur is a French word that means hunter, so it's hunter-style chicken. And chasseur sauce is a brown sauce containing mushrooms, shallots, white wine, and tomatoes. And all of this sounds pretty good to me, so let's get going with this. Okay, we're going to start things off with a brine. So with 1 gallon of water in a large mixing bowl, add a half a cup each of kosher salt and sugar, along with 2 bay leaves and 10 to 12 peppercorns. I'm also adding a bit of fresh thyme and parsley as well. Grab your trusty whisk and stir it all together to dissolve the salt and sugar, and when you've reached that point, you're ready to add the chicken. And I'm going with a mixture of legs and thighs here. The dark meat pieces are always more flavorful and more forgiving as far as not drying out, and less expensive, so it's kind of a win-win-win all the way around. And once you've added the chicken, the whole thing can be put into the refrigerator to brine overnight. And when the brine has completed its process, ideally 24 hours, and if not that, I would shoot for at least 12, strain it out, and arrange the chicken pieces onto a sheet tray, preferably with a wire cooling rack on top. And that's because the next step in this process is to air dry the chicken, so maximizing airflow is ideal. Chicken pieces that are soaking wet will not only have a hard time searing and browning, they will also stick to the pan like a motherfucker, so this is an important step. And you might be wanting to ask me, hey man, can't I just dry brine these and simplify the whole process? And the answer to that is yes, but I would focus more on salting the flesh and not so much the skin. Salt doesn't really dig through the skin, it just kind of sits on the surface. And while this process I'm doing is a bit more fussy, it does yield the best results all the way around. So I've allowed these to air dry overnight. I think it was about 14 hours. A full 24 would have been better, so I'm actually going to burn through some paper towels to dry the surface a bit more. And taking the extra time to do this is worth it. They will be much less likely to stick to the pan if you do this, so take the time to do it. Okay, now that our chicken's ready to go, we're ready to get started cooking this thing. And there are many different ways that chicken chasseur can be put together, but the way that I'm gonna do it today is called braising. And braising is a combination cooking technique that involves sauteing and simmering. You first sear the food in a pan, you build a sauce within the same pan, you cook the food and the sauce together, and you serve it all together as well. And the type of pan you want to use for braising is called a rondo or a braiser. It has a wide base and shallow sides. A Dutch oven also works really well for this, and they are pretty much the same pan. So I'm going to start the heat between medium and high, put it down, let's grab our chicken, and let's get going with this. Okay, once the pan heats up, add a small amount of any high smoke point oil, then begin to nestle the chicken pieces in one by one, making sure not to overcrowd the pan. And 6 pieces is usually the limit for this particular pan. And you should notice that the pieces are sizzling and not slowly bubbling. If they're gently bubbling, the heat is not high enough and the pieces won't take on any color, nor will the pan produce any fond at the bottom. This is critical to developing depth of flavor with braising and stewing, and you should be able to tell when placing the first piece down. If the pan isn't hot enough, pull the piece out and wait until the pan is hot enough. And after a few minutes on the first side, they should be lightly browned and ready to flip over to brown the other side. And it's important to be patient here as well, because chicken that isn't ready to be flipped will stick to the pan and peel apart, and we want to keep the pieces whole here. Sometimes the pieces might be a little fidgety anyway, and if they are, just work your tongs around them from a few different angles while making sure not to destroy the pieces. You should be able to get them all flipped over, and once you do, repeat the same searing process on the second side. And once that side has taken on a bit of browning as well, we can remove all of the pieces and begin to build our sauce. So with the chicken pieces set aside, drop the heat to low and add 1 tablespoon of tomato paste along with 1 ounce of all-purpose flour. Stir this together and keep it moving because it will burn easily, but we do want to lightly toast them before moving on to the next step. This should only take a minute or two, and when it's ready, work in 2 ounces or 1/4 cup of white wine. And now you want to begin scraping the bits off the bottom of the pot, and once the wine has nearly evaporated, you can slowly add 2 cups of brown beef stock while whisking out any potential lumps. And you want to continue to break apart the stuff on the bottom here too. And once you've got all of the stock added, toss in a pinch of salt along with 2 bay leaves, and because we're using flour as the thickener for the sauce, you need to bring the sauce to a boil for the full thickening effect, and this is called gelatinization, and it's when starches absorb water and swell and they eventually burst, releasing amylopectin into the sauce, thickening it up and giving it viscosity. And with the sauce fully thickened, we can add the chicken back to the pot, and with braising braising, the liquid should come up 1/3 to 1/2 the height of the food. Then set the heat to a gentle simmer, pop a lid on top, and allow it to simmer for 30 to 40 minutes. Chasseur sauce is a derivative of the French mother sauce Espagnole sauce. It combines Espagnole sauce with mushrooms, shallots, white wine, and tomatoes. So with that in mind, there are many different ways that chicken chasseur can be put together. Of course, one option is to do what we are doing today, which is braising, but another option would be to roast the chicken pieces, make the sauce completely independently of that, serve the two together, and again, you've got chicken chasseur. You could saute a chicken breast, again, make the sauce, serve the two together, and that's also chicken chasseur. So there are many different ways of putting this together. Okay, jumping back into it, let's get the rest of our sauce components ready. Starting with a small sauce pot over medium heat, add a tablespoon of butter along with 8 ounces of cremini mushrooms. Add a pinch of salt and continue to stir and cook the mushrooms until they've released most of their moisture, and along with the bottom of the pot itself, they've taken on a bit of brown coloring. And this looks pretty good here, so I'll add 1 shallot that I've diced into 1/4 inch squares and cook them until they soften and turn translucent. Now jumping back over to the chicken pot, it's been gently simmering for about 35 minutes now, so they're fully cooked and we can remove them from the pot and set them aside so they can rest for a few minutes while we clean the sauce up and finish getting it ready. Now once you have all of the chicken removed, place a strainer on top of the mushroom pot and empty out the contents from the braising pot into it, and you'll see here why I did all of this. It removes a lot of the gunk and impurities and cleans the sauce up and just makes it better overall. Now the final step here is to add 2 ounces of diced tomatoes straight out of the can, then reduce the sauce down by about 1/3, which is going to thicken it up a little bit more and concentrate its flavor. And about 10 minutes later, this is looking pretty good, I think, so with that, let's get this thing plated up. Start by placing a few pieces of chicken on a plate, and I'm using this fancy blue one that I got at Target, and I also roasted some potatoes off camera, so I'll nestle a few of those up alongside the chicken pieces. The potatoes are really easy to make. Just split some Yukon Golds down the middle the long way, toss them with olive oil, salt, and pepper, and place them on a parchment-lined sheet tray cut side down, and roast them in a 450-degree oven until they're deeply golden brown like you see here. And with the main ingredients on the plate, I'll finish it off with a few hefty spoonfuls of our delicious chasseur sauce, and finally garnish it with some finely chopped parsley. And with that, we've reached the end of the video, so as always, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.